Okay, I'm going to call the special meeting of City Council for Friday, October 21st, 2022 at 1:05 to order. Our first order of business is two reports. We have 2.1 report number 22-115 from the corporate officer, reason the South Peace Health Service Society request to operate a healthcare locum at 1608 106th Avenue. Get a motion first.
Motion that we approve it.
There's four recommendations. I think,
I'd be prepared to move motion one
okay. Can I get a seconder?
as presented.
Okay, a seconder. Councillor Javetkov. Councillor Parslow made the motion for number one. Okay. Discussion. Blair, did you want to give us a quick update before?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report really encompasses a discussion that began a number of months ago with the city when this city of Dawson Creek took possession of the property that we're talking about here on 106th Avenue. There has been discussion about the need for housing for locums and visiting nurses that come to our city. Most municipalities, or many, I wouldn't say most, are now in a position where they're looking at housing options to help accommodate these professionals. So this is about the city of Dawson Creek entering into an agreement with the South Peace Health Services Society. They would then take over the property. They would run it under a lease with the city, and they would provide the service, all of the work, the snow clearing, the maintenance of the facility, and so on, to provide housing for either locums or nurses. So they do need to do some renovation. We've been told it's quite small, flooring, painting, and conversion of one bedroom, I believe. But we would, based on the motion, should it pass the number of motions that are before council today, we will work with the proponents, if it is a positive motion and to move ahead, to make sure they have the required permits and so on, and it meets all of the requirements of the city as well. So.
Okay.
All right.
And then just to add to that, I think the South Peace Health Service Society, they've raised the funds to do the renovations too, right?
Oh, yes, they
so
are.
looking after all that.
All of that,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Any questions? I guess I can call that question to vote.
I'm in favor. Charlie here.
Okay.
In favor, Amy.
Okay. Good. The vote is closed, so it's carried. Okay, so this motion number two, the recommendation, can you get a motion?
Motion two is to do with the
Utility.
payment for utilities. I'd be prepared to move that the society would be responsible.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Earl? Any discussion?
My reason, if I may, is
Yep.
The work of the South Peace Health Society concerning, for instance, the other building that they've been has always been my understanding that we would not be absorbing any of the costs.
Okay. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to this, is just some clarification on the motion, I guess. Is this, is the motion cover, the agreement we're looking into, entering into here is there's two phases. While the South Peace Health Services Society is updating the residents to make it appropriate for use, and then once people move in there and presumably they're as per the email and the communications we've received, they're in discussions with Northern Health to provide some funding for that. So while I don't necessarily have an issue covering the utilities while it's vacant and being worked on, once it's occupied by, Northern Health employees for the purposes of helping with Northern Health staffing, and Northern Health is providing funding to the Health Services Society, it makes sense to me as to Councillor Parslow moving of this motion, or that's how I interpret it, that they would then cover the costs as part of the agreement. Is that what we're doing, or are they just moving forward, they're expected to cover the cost from the day it's signed?
I would think my assumption would be we're signing a lease with them, so whenever that lease is dated, that's when it would take place. So if the lease was dated November 1st, then all of these would be in there, I'm assuming.
That would be our understanding as well, Your Worship. So what would happen is we will, based on the motions here today, and again, I will, make an assumption just for the sake of this discussion that if Mayor and Council yourselves pass the motions necessary to allow the South Peace Health Services Society to take this property over under a lease, we will negotiate the formal lease. You will see it. It will be brought back before this board. But upon signing of that lease is when I believe the transfer of the utility accounts and so on would go to them at that time. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll call motion number 2 to vote.
Charlie here, I'm in favor.
Thank you.
Amy in favor.
Thank you. Okay, vote is closed. It's carried. All right, we have motion number 3. Councillor Javetkov.
I'll move motion number 3 in the event that the city incurs additional insurance costs through the agreement between the city and the South Peace Health Services Society regarding the property located at 1608 106th Avenue, that any additional insurance costs be the responsibility of the society.
Do I have a second?
Charlie, I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Javetkov? Did you want to?
Well, it's an additional cost, and the society should bear the cost.
Are we, will we look after the base insurance costs? Because generally when you lease something out, like, well, we would have insurance on the buildings, and they would have content insurance, right, as leasing?
We would work, sorry, Your Worship, sorry. We would work with the society on this. Right now, we have insurance on the buildings and the property.
Yeah.
It's fairly expensive when you have nobody living there. So the cost would probably be in the $4,500 a year range if it was a vacant property. We expect that the South Peace Health Services Society would insure, and we will work with them based on what we need. So the motion is worded in such a manner that if it was greater than what we incur now, it would be them. They will be responsible for the majority of insurance, but we will ensure that the city is protected should anything happen on the property or their insurance. Usually, a leasee will get insurance that names the city as well as an additional insured, but that will come back under the lease agreement itself. We have a number of leases in place that deal with this, so we will ensure it meets the needs of the city of Dawson Creek to protect the city. It's the key for us.
So just to clarify for myself and everybody, so this will just only be if the insurance is greater, like the greater amount of the cost then would go to the society, or would they look after all the insurance?
I believe, and I'll look to Brenda, I believe they're responsible for the insurance, and we need to be named as additional insured on the leases that I have looked at. But because the property is so large, there may be a requirement on a couple of the outbuildings that are not going to be part of this lease. We've got the ones on the banks of the creek, for example. Do we need anything additional under the insurance policy? And we would work with Michelle in finance to make sure that our needs are met on that.
Okay.
So, but it is not the intent that this will cost the city money to insure the property beyond what any other lease in the city incurs for the city. So
Yeah, I was just thinking, that if there was a bit of a cost for us to insure the building, that would make sense. And then they would look after contents like a normal lease would.
Okay, we will ensure that what we want is continuity amongst the leases that we already have as
Okay.
well. We've
Okay.
worked hard to bring that continuity in place amongst our leases, so we'll make sure it meets those.
Okay, thank you. Was there any more discussion? I'll call the question to vote, or the motion.
Charlie in favor?
Thank you.
Amy in favor.
The vote is closed and it's carried. All right, motion number 4, Councillor Javetkov.
So motion number 4, I'll move in the event that the city property located at 1608 106th Avenue becomes taxable in 2023 due to the agreement with the South Peace Health Services Society, that the society be responsible for any property taxes owing.
Do I have a second? Councillor Earl?
Charlie?
Councillor Javetkov, did you want to speak to that?
No, again, it's a cost that, and we've already done a permissive tax bylaw, so, if they're leasing the property, they should be responsible for taxes as well.
Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, are there any other existing agreements that we're aware of where a city proper, like, the curling rink, for instance, does that, they don't pay property taxes on our, like, what's the likelihood that this is going to become taxable in 2023?
So presently, through you, your worship, we have adopted our tax exempt bylaw for 2023. So there's two things. The motion before you is that the society would, that's been moved and seconded, would be responsible for all taxes. If the city chose that they would be responsible for the taxes, it would be through a grant for 2023, following which I would suggest the city would put it on their tax exempt bylaw. A lease like with the curling club, for example, the building is owned by the city, it is tax exempt. It sits on our tax exempt bylaw. So they do not pay taxes on that. At least, am I correct on that, Brenda?
Oh,
Yes,
sorry. I won't do that.
through you, Mr. Chair. I just recalled the policy for permissive tax exemption does include city-owned facilities, and this is a city-owned facility. So I would expect that the taxes would be covered by the city. I believe, I'm not sure if they need to make a formal application or not. I can't recall in the policy if any of the groups had to do that. Terry would be able to answer that one, but
I don't believe they had to apply because it was an automatic permissive tax exempt because we owned it. The challenge for 2023 is because we have adopted our permissive tax exempt bylaw already. It could be amended, but you would need to call a couple of special meetings immediately before the end of the month. So based on where this discussion goes and the vote of yourselves, if it is that the city wants to cover the taxes, it would be through a grant. So if taxes were $3,000 for 2023, for example, the city would give a grant to the South Peace Health Services Society of $3,000. It would be, here's your money and here it is back in a nutshell. But if that is not the case, then they would be responsible for the taxes.
Yep. Charlie here. Right?
Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
Yes, I think the wording of the motion, I don't have it in front of me, is should the property be taxable, that the society would be responsible. This is a city-owned facility, so I would expect it ultimately to align with our standard practice for city-owned facilities. So the motion is saying that the society is responsible, but I would also be in favor of giving them a grant for this year, and then rather than reopening the whole permissive tax thing again.
Well, I think from what I understand, the motion on the floor is that the society would be responsible for the property tax. There was another option to have a different motion, but the motion on the floor is that the South Peace Health Service Society, if this motion is passed, will pay for the taxes. So
Would be responsible, yes, for the taxes, yeah.
yeah. So that being said, I won't be in favor of this motion. I was leaning towards the second one, but I won't vote in favor of it. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry, I'm still trying to kind of square the circle here. So we don't, when we own a facility, whether it's the art gallery, whether it's KPAC, we don't charge ourselves taxes for that facility. We don't, I mean, the whole reason we instituted the 15% revenue recapture policy was to create some equity between nonprofits that are operating out of city facilities and nonprofits that are operating out of their own facilities and are getting a tax exempt. I mean, that was part of how do we find the balance between those two things. So with respect to, should, you know, in the event that the city property located becomes taxable, we would essentially have to decide to make that taxable, or would BC Assessment do it because it's a residence as opposed to a recreation facility? Like, under what circumstances is this going to become taxable that would make this particular motion relevant, is I think what I'm trying to ask.
I believe what makes it taxable is we have entered a lease, but we have not put this property that we're speaking about today on the tax exempt bylaw. I believe the other properties are on the tax exempt bylaw. Okay. So failing us putting it on the tax exempt bylaw and having that passed, there is taxes due to the city. Now those taxes would either be paid by the city back to, you know, through, as I said, a transfer to the Health Services Society, they give it back to us, which has to occur if that's the wish of council for 2023, at which time the city would then, I am going to take this assumption, put that property under the tax exempt bylaw, like the other city-owned properties that we have.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry, it took me a
No,
minute to catch up there. I just needed to make that distinction because it didn't occur to me that we had already, that our own properties were already kind of given the tax exemption. I thought it was just, so, yeah, no, I would be in favor of providing a grant for the 2023. I guess if we need to defeat this motion to make that happen, simply because, and then I guess whether or not they qualify for tax exemption in 2023 will be a decision of the next council. And I guess for me, dependent upon what kind of funding they are able to secure from Northern Health. So, yeah, I would have preferred the second part of motion 4, and I'll vote against this in the hopes that we can pass that.
Councillor Javetkov?
So I'm not in favor of being a partner where we give them the property to use and then we pay additional costs. If it comes out of a grant, we've got a grant budget of $12,000. Of course, new council can increase it, but what you're doing is taking away from other legitimate grant requests. If you give these guys a grant, I mean, you could increase the budget for grants, like you could double it or triple it or whatever the new council wishes to do. However, I don't agree with that. I also think that we have to be consistent. We have the curling club occupies a building. They don't pay taxes, but we do have a way to collect money from them through the agreement, through the lease agreement. And that's what we've been doing. Same with the Lakota Center. And I would see this as the same thing. I mean, if there's a tax incurred, then somehow through the lease agreement, it would be recovered. I just don't agree with, you know, being a partner where you give me everything and we'll be your partner. That's just not the way I see things. So I like the motion as it sits. If there's taxes, the leaseholder is responsible.
And I think Thank you, Councillor Dretkov. On the other side of that, from what I understand too, is that they're going to be injecting like their own funds into our property to enhance it as well. So they're paying for the renovations, painting, flooring, etc. So that's why I'll be opposed to this, because I think, they're contributing to our property. So, Councillor Dretkov?
That's consistent with Curling Club. They contribute,
Yeah.
and Lakota. So, you can rationalize it any way you want, but you're either for it or against it. I'm for this.
Okay. Thank you. Blair, did you want to?
Just for clarification on the leases to make sure, so I will pull, there's 6 line item GL codes that our lessees pay a portion of. 15% is what we'd set. We pay the utilities in those places. They pay 15%. There's a distinction I wanted to make sure people were aware of. We would not be paying the utilities at this other place. They would be responsible for all of it versus something like the Lakota Center. We pay 85%, they pay 15%, for example, just so that I didn't want that to go without putting it forward, so.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any more discussion?
Well, yes, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
Charlie here. Yeah. So I'm all for alignment, and this next year will be a transition year in my mind for this particular property. In a year's time, I see this becoming permissible tax exempt, and so I believe that what we're doing here is we're saying you're responsible, and then in a year's time it will be on the permissible tax exemption, I'm assuming. And for this transition year, should they request a grant, I would be in favor of a grant to cover their taxes. All I'm trying to do is, I think we're making it overly complicated. So that's why I'm in favor of the motion, because this is a transition. Thank you.
So, Councillor Parslow, just so I can clarify, you're saying that you're in favor of this, and then you would want them to come back to us and ask for a grant for the.
Once
in the
they know
transition.
what their tax bill, once they know what their tax bill is, yes. I mean, we don't know the amount until, of course, we set taxes, and then we can give them a grant to offset that, and then put the property on permissive tax exemption following year.
Okay, thank you. Blair, was there something that you wanted to add, or were you?
There's, like, as we said, I think the motion, as moved, is the society would be responsible for their taxes. As I understand the motion, it has been moved and seconded. The discussion has been, there's 2 things. Should the society come forward and ask for help on those, we would give a grant, or possibly entertain a grant, because it will be a vote of council. That's how, so that's one option. There's really only 2. Is the city, if we're going to enter into a lease, going to ask the society to pay the taxes? And possibly in 2023, I'm hearing the city may put it on the tax exempt bylaw, because that's a vote of council as well that determines that. So it's kind of a mix. If it really comes down to this, and I don't want to oversimplify it, if the city is going to enter into a lease and thinks that the society's taxes should be covered, then option 2 is the one. If the city enters into a lease and believes the society should be responsible to pay their taxes presently, then option 1. I'm not sure I can add any more to that.
Okay, thank you. And then did you not say earlier that all city property, does it automatically go to the permissive tax, or do we have to put it in there?
We will put it on, as I understand it, through Terry in finance.
So next year, this property would be under permissive tax because it's city-owned?
As I understand it, but again, you adopt it. And
Once
if you don't adopt it, as we've done in the
okay.
past, some have been taken off, some have been added as recently as a month ago. So
Okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the Chief Financial Officer would draft the permissive tax exemption bylaw in accordance with the policy. The policy currently states that city-owned properties are not taxed.
Would
So
be
they
on
would be included on the bylaw, and council makes that decision at that time.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Okay, if there's no more discussion, I think we have enough information. I'll call the question to vote.
Charlie in favor.
Amy, not in favor.
Thank you. All votes are in. It's closed. That motion is defeated. Would somebody like to make another? Councillor Earl? Oh, just one sec, sorry. There you go.
I'll move motion 4-2, or in the event that the city property located at 1608 106th Avenue becomes taxable in 2023 due to the agreement with the South Peace Health Services Society, the city provide a grant equivalent to the society for any applicable property taxes for 2023 and require the society to submit a formal application for a permissive tax exemption for future years.
Do I have a second?
Amy, also.
Amy, second. Any discussion?
The point I thought Councillor Parslow was making, but he voted in the affirmative. This, to my mind, is to help with the transition. I think there are exceptional circumstances. This is an identified need in our community around providing facilities to help visiting locums and what have you, and I think we've got a role to play in that. How this arrangement evolves in future years has yet to be decided, but for this period of transition, I think it's reasonable, and in particular because the society is ponying up some capital right out of the gate. I think that's demonstrates their commitment to make this work. So I'm happy to move this.
Thank you. No other discussion. I will call this motion to vote.
Amy in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Parslow?
I'm still thinking. No, I'm in favor.
Thank you. The vote is closed. It's carried. All right, I will motion to adjourn. Councillor Earl, second. Councillor Javetkov. I'll call that question to vote.
Yeah.
Amy in favor.
Right on. Good deal. We're making some progress.
Councillor Parslow,
Yes,
you're in favor or opposed?
Yep.
In favor? Okay,
favor.
All right.
we're good. Vote's closed, it's carried. Thank you, everybody, for coming in, and thank you, Brenda, for
All right.
putting this together. Short notice.